This book is one of the 8. And this is book number 4 that I'm reading. I'd like to dedicate this to the executive branch of our government. Mr. Lazy lives in Sleepyland, which is a very lazy-looking and sleepy-like place. The birds in Sleepyland fly so slowly, they sometimes fall out of the sky. The grass takes so long to grow, it only needs cutting once a year. Even the trees are lazy-looking and sleepy-like. And do you know what time everybody gets up in Sleepyland? The answer is they don't get up in the morning. They get up in the afternoon. And incidentally, this is what a Sleepyland clock looks like. Everything takes so long to do. There's only time for 4 hours a day. Anyway, this story starts with Mr. Lazy being fast asleep in bed. In Sleepyland, they call that being slow asleep. He spends a lot of time in bed, in his favorite place to be. Mr. Lazy got up very late and went to make his breakfast. We say breakfast, although it was very late in the afternoon. He put the kettle on to boil water for some coffee. Kettles take 2 hours to boil in Sleepyland. Then he toasted a slice of bread. Bread takes 3 hours to brown in Sleepyland. Toast never gets burnt there. While he was waiting for his kettle to boil and his bread to toast, Mr. Lazy went into the garden of Yawn Cottage, which was where he lived. He sat down on a chair, and you can probably guess what happened next. That's right. He yawned and yawned again and went to sleep. Suddenly he woke with a jump, which is something that doesn't happen very often to Mr. Lazy. And the reason he woke up with the jump was because of a noise. "Wake up," said the noise. "Wake up, wake up, wake up." There were 2 men standing in front of him. "I'm Mr. Busy," said one of the men. "And I'm Mr. Bustle," said the other. "Come along now," said Mr. Bustle busily. "We can't have you sleeping all day," added Mr. Busy, pulling Mr. Lazy to his feet. But who are you?" asked Mr. Lazy. "We're Bustle and Busy," they replied. They just need some dark glasses. "Come along now," said Mr. Busy. "We haven't got all day." "But," said Mr. Lazy. "No time for buts," said Mr. Busy. "It's off, or ifs," added Mr. Bustle. "There's the wood to chop, and the beds to make, and the floors to clean, and the dishes to wash, and the furniture to dust, and the grass to cut, and the hedges to clip, and the food to cook, and the clothes to mend," added Mr. Busy. "Oh dear," groaned Mr. Lazy in a daze. "The wood to clean, and the beds to get, and the floors to cut, and the dishes to mend, and the furniture to chop, and the grass to wash, and the hedges to dust, and the clothes to clip." He had gotten it all completely wrong. because he was in such a daze. Then Bustle and Busy set Mr. Lazy to work, chopping and making and cleaning and getting and polishing and washing and dusting and cutting and clipping and cooking and mending, not to mention all the fetching and carrying. Poor Mr. Lazy. Now, they said when he'd finished, it's time for a walk. And off they set on the longest walk Mr. Lazy had ever been on. Mr. Lazy is one of those people who never walks when he has a chance to sit down, and never sits down when he has a chance to lie down. But this day, he had no choice. They made him walk for miles and miles and miles until he felt his legs must be worn right down to his body. Poor Mr. Lazy. When they arrived back at Yon Cottage, Mr. Busy said, "Right, now for a run." "Oh, no," groaned Mr. Lazy. "When I blow this whistle, you start running," said Mr. Bustle. "As fast as you can," added Mr. Busy. Mr. Lazy groaned a deep groan and closed his eyes. "Whee!" whistled the whistle. Poor Mr. Lazy started to run, but his legs weren't getting him anywhere. He opened his eyes and looked down to see why. And the reason his legs weren't getting him anywhere was because he was sitting on the chair in the garden. And there was no sign of Mr. Busy and Mr. Bustle. It had all been a terrible dream. And the whistle was the whistling kettle boiling in the kitchen. Mr. Lazy heaved a sigh of relief. And then he went into the kitchen and sat down to have his breakfast and to think about his dream. But you know what happened next, don't you? "Wake up, Mr. Lazy! Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up!" I hope you enjoyed this book. There are many Mr. Books, apparently. They're all here. And I will read them to you. Mr. Quiet, Mr. Forgetful, Mr. Chatterbox, Mr. Noisy, Mr. Muddle, Mr. Bounce, Mr. Greedy, Mr. Impossible, Mr. Bump, Mr. Nonsense, Mr. Clumsy, Mr. Small, Mr. Grumpy, Mr. Happy, Mr. Tickle, Mr. Busy, Mr. Fussy, Mr. Skinny, Mr. Worry, Mr. Silly, Mr. Nosy, Mr. Mischief, and Mr. Messy. If the military has their way, we will all have the same name, Mr. You see, this is a collection of character traits. Many of them are negative. But my point is, we are not to fit ourselves into a peg that doesn't fit us. And the military believes that that is the future. Everyone is an individual. And everyone should be allowed to exist without other people judging them. Think about that and have a good night.